sign-in sheets. Yep.
So you mind if I go ahead and get started? There's another meeting in here at 10,
Go
so.
ahead.
So this is the first meeting of the Landscape Subcommittee of the PPAC. First of all, we'd like to do a roll call of the members that are present. Mark Eversman. Steve Keller.
Vince Pagetto.
Cindy Watterson.
Nancy Smith.
And Bruce
Blatt
Blatt is
remotely.
on. Yeah. So the first order of business that we need to take care of, well, we can do the Pledge of Allegiance. We don't have a flag in here. You said do the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, we do. Jen has ordered a flag since we're having a lot of meetings in here now, but the closest flag is right through that wall.
Okay. So do the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mark, can you please make it known that you have staff here as well?
We do have Chelsea and Keith here as well, representing the CDD. Bob Geppert and Carol Penkow are also here. First order of business that we need to take care of is to elect a chair and a vice chair in our group. So the floor is open for nominations for chair, first of all.
Do you want to continue to be chair?
You could nominate me.
I will nominate
I
you, Mark.
second.
All right. Are there any other?
Make sure you put a name to it so our transcriptionist knows.
Okay, I nominate Mark Averson.
I second Mark
right.
Everson.
Are there any other nominations for chair? Hearing none, we'll do a vocal A or all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, I'm elected chair. Do we have nominations for vice chair?
I'm happy to do it, or you can do it.
Well, Bruce. I nominate Bruce Blatt.
Well, the only problem is I'm not a full-time resident, so I think it would not be the best
It would-
choice.
It would be nice to have full-time for vice chair.
I nominate Nancy Smith.
I second it.
Are there any other nominations for vice chair? All in favor of Nancy Smith being vice chair, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nancy is vice chair.
Mark, can you please vote to allow Bruce virtually, considering circumstances and unusual.
Bruce is not available here due to unusual circumstances, the birth of twin grandchildren.
Yay.
So that seems to be a pretty good reason not to attend in person. But I would like to allow Bruce to be able to participate remotely.
All those in favor?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I appreciate that.
Make sure you do that every time. If you have anybody virtually.
Okay. First time with this.
Yep, you're good. You're
All
doing
right.
good.
First of all, we would ask for any public comments, considering pretty small group.
Have agendas or no?
It was on.
Thank you.
Everybody?
Thank you.
Carol?
So, any public comments?
Any public comment?
No. Next would be typically approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Since this is our first meeting, there was no last meeting, so I think we can go by that.
Okay.
Financial report, I did get where we are with Laura Leroy, who also works for the CDD and is very helpful. For our budget, we have a maintenance and repair of $80,000. and of which we've used 1,250. We've already allocated another approximately $11,000 for that for the stump removal from the hurricane. So Ameriscape has been given the go-ahead on that. So that will take about another 11,000 out of that. We have a plants replacement budget of 103,000, of which approximately 2,900 has been approved. Again, we are going to hit that hard when we start replacing a lot of the plants that we have lost due to the hurricane.
Could you repeat that budget number, please?
103,000.
Thank you.
In the future, this financial report will be provided as part of your packet.
Excellent.
We have an annual tree trimming budget of 153, of which approximately half of that is already allocated for an upcoming tree trimming that will be done. Now, the one that gets interesting, which I'd like to revisit later, is the monuments and cul-de-sacs. We have a budget of $15,000, of which all of that is already allocated for this year with a list of people waiting beyond that. But I would like to come back to that and discuss the cul-de-sacs later. Tree and sod replacement, we have a budget of $31,200, of which about $5,500 is already allocated. Shared entry feature, where is the shared entry feature?
I believe that's the one out at Tree Line.
Okay,
If it's shared, it would be Tree Line Colonial.
okay. Tree line and Colonial, we have a budget of $16,000, of which we have used none so far. A note on that, Carol is working on the possibility that we may relieve ourselves of those assets, of which we would either sell them, assign them to someone else, whatever. So then that money would potentially be available for other
The Board of Supervisors directed our district council, Tony, to further look into this and reach out because there are some outstanding bonds with regards to Pelican, and that monument and those parcels are tied in with those bonds. We have to go and reach out to the bond council and see if we can pull those out and then potentially sell them. But the board has weighed in on that.
Okay. Then we have an irrigation maintenance budget, which is $3,600. That used to be a much bigger part of our budget until it got rolled into the contract the last time we did this contract. A good part of the irrigation, the general where the pop-ups aren't spraying correctly, things like that is now part of the contract as opposed to separate. So, but we do have other things that could happen with irrigation. So there's a number of $3,600.
I'm sorry, I think you said 312,000 or 300.
312,000 for tree and sod
Thank you.
replacement, which you can see some of these buckets you could mix. Plant replacement could also be tree replacement, et cetera, et cetera. So,
If you guys can do me a favor, so just before you speak, announce your name. That way our transcriptionist, she can write down who's speaking until she can learn your voices.
Sure.
okay. And then we have GIS services, and that's a budget of 15,000, of which 13,000 is already allocated.
This is Cindy Watterson talking. What is the GIS service?
The mapping and things like that. We've been spending a lot of time and effort to figure out exactly what areas we're responsible for, and we hope to have those very shortly.
The district, directed by PPAC, the Pelican Preserve Advisory Committee, had a great idea years ago to put on a map everything that was theirs. And so every year, of course, new things come about. And so that 15,000 is essentially for Passarella, which is the vendor who does it, to update or anything else that comes up that either you guys may ask or district staff may ask to update our GIS system with the latest and greatest information.
Like if you wanted to know where every oak tree was on the property, that would be a function of the GIS to locate it and map it. That's just an example. But
We are doing a lot with mapping right now because with Castle leaving and talking with Ameriscape, when you ask Ameriscape, why do you do this area? Their response is because that's the way we've always done it, or that's what we were told to. There is not necessarily an easement for us or anything. We just go by what Ameriscape has done in the past. There were some areas that were added a few years ago per Castle's request. We're not quite sure why. So there is a movement going forward, which should be complete shortly, that will actually designate what areas we are really responsible for.
There's a lot more going on to this.
Mhm.
The district is actually reviewing we call it an O&M agreement, which is our operations and maintenance agreement with PPCA, the Community Association. And as part of that, the district board directed our attorney to start to look at all of GSCDD owned and maintained assets. Landscaping, I think this Mark, or maybe a year ago, is kind of what prompted that discussion and research, because with Castle leaving, KW coming on board, there's a lot of gray areas, and we want to make sure as the district that we're only maintaining our assets. And so next steps, Tony, our attorney, is wrapping that up, hopefully soon. He's been working on it for quite a few months now, but it is a huge task. I think the next steps we've talked about is hopefully having a designee, if it's the chair or vice chair or whomever, meet with district staff and our contractor, Ameriscape, and physically walk and have them show and confirm the locations that they're maintaining, and making sure that per those maps that Tony is drawing up, that we're maintaining what we should be maintaining. And if we're not, then figuring out next steps. So that's kind of where we're at with this. So we will be looking towards this group, if it's Mark or another designee, to assist us with that process.
Mark, if I may, Bob Geppert, just further background without belaboring this, but the reason that we have so many gray areas is when the community was run by WCI, they also ran the community association. So it didn't really matter to them to differentiate in what people were doing as far as suppliers. They just said, we want Pelican Reserve Boulevard to be trimmed. They didn't care whether it was golf course property or resident property, GSCDD, it didn't matter. So they just set people up to do it. And we traveled down that road for about 15 years. Then all of a sudden we differentiated to a much greater detail than ever before between GSCDD assets, community assets, shared assets, which are typically commercial. So now we have definite definitions by contract. The next step to that was to enforce those definitions, and that's when we proverbially hit the wall. So now that is all being researched properly, as Chelsea just said. It's a long and arduous process, but when we're done, and the reason we did it was we collectively, anybody with GSCDD, spend public money on private assets. So we have to differentiate, and where they are private assets, like a private homeowner, then we need a grant of easement to do the landscape. So that's the long and lengthy.
If we choose to continue, and if that property owner is open to allowing that. So again, we're just trying to clear up this gray area. Even with not only we're finding things that are still in WCI's name, but with community association or the district. So we really want to own in on this, and then that way you guys as a group moving forward can have clear direction on what you're responsible for.
Great.
And this really came to light when we got a proposal for stump removal, and it was tens of thousands of dollars. And then when I rode around with Ameriscape, I asked him to point out, and he started going down roads, and it's like, that's not on my map that we're responsible for. And he goes, well, that's what we've been doing. And it's like, well, I'm not going to pay to have those done at this point until we finish with this study to determine whether or not we should be paying for that. So it does come out to some pretty substantial money when you look at some of the areas that they've been maintaining.
Well, and then it turns into the Me Too movement. Well, you're maintaining over there. Why aren't you maintaining mine? And so we want to make sure we're only spending GSCDD funding on GSCDD assets.
So that's a long story, which hopefully will come to fruition
Thank you.
shortly.
Yes.
So that would be it for financials at this point. Are there any questions? again, the majority of our funding, which we get over $1 million, this group does, but the majority of that is an automatic monthly payout to Ameriscape per the contract. That's approximately $850,000 Ameriscape is paid throughout the year. And that's nothing that we do besides say, yep, that's the contract, go ahead and pay it.
So to kind of just set the pace with how this group, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the GSCDD and how we operate over there, but to just kind of give you guys a 10,000 foot overview. So we have our board of supervisors, and then the board hires and fires essentially two people, myself as the district manager and our town attorney or our district attorney. Staff answer to myself. Ultimately, we all work for the board in the end, but the board has two advisory committees. One is the Pelican Preserve Advisory Committee, and then the other is a recently established Parks and Rec Advisory Committee. These subcommittees, although they may have been operating informally in the past, we have now formalized them and made them official subcommittees. So Pelican has 3 subcommittees. It's your guys' group here. We have a safety and security work group. And then we have a ponds work group. And so you all answer directly to the Pelican Preserve Advisory Committee, which in essence answers to the board. But the board has delegated certain authorities to PPAC, specifically for basically everything in Pelican oversight. So if you guys come up with a proposal or an idea, you would make your recommendation to PPAC at their monthly meeting. And ultimately they would, because the funding availability is at their level, your recommendation would go to them. From a staff perspective, we're here as liaisons. We're not here to do all of the legwork for you guys. We're just here to assist you in accomplishing tasks and getting information if you need some information. So ultimately, Keith and or his designee will be your staff liaison moving forward. We have a very small staff. We're all wearing multiple hats. Considering this was your first meeting, I really wanted to come over here and put names with faces and kind of help set the tone for our expectations. Ultimately, our expectations come from the board. And they've made it clear that they want volunteers to oversee really the day-to-day. Again, we're a small staff. You guys live in the community. It's a lot easier, I'm sure, for you to jump on your golf cart or in your car and drive over and look at something than it would be for us coming all the way from the district. But we are here to support you. We're here to help out in any way we can. This is going to be a learning process, especially with these agendas, and these are public meetings, so anybody can come to these. We have our couple public members here now. The board chose to host them over here. Ultimately, it'll be the chair's responsibility or vice chair's responsibility for coordinating the room and the meeting space and letting Georgia, our admin, know so that way she can post it on the agenda. We want to hopefully establish a set date each month for you guys to meet. And hopefully it's once a month because it is quite a bit of legwork on a staff perspective with the paperwork and publishing and notices and things like that. So that's just kind of the brief.
The only other thing to add to that is Bob Jeopardy is typically you will have a liaison from PPAC that Mark will interface with. It used to be Mark, but he resigned from PPAC.
I couldn't talk to myself.
So as he couldn't talk to himself. So at the next meeting, we hope that one of the 7 members of PPAC will be targeted as the liaison. So Mark and him can communicate without any problem with sunshine laws or any of those things.
And regarding sunshine laws, I think we should probably make that an agenda, suggestion to make the rules
Yes.
for sunshine laws an agenda item.
We'll have Tony do his brief presentation. It's not really brief. It's not really brief, but do his presentation. Ultimately, you guys cannot meet and talk about anything that you would take action on outside of a publicly noticed meeting. But our attorney will do a presentation at your next meeting and kind of give you guys that educational component of being a formal subcommittee of the districts.
And they're also covered by our insurance policy, is that correct?
We have a blanket umbrella.
So you're all insured by the district as it relates to the duties on this subject.
Correct.
Ponds is a subcommittee that has operated for years and done extremely well in Pelican. So we're not something brand new as far as that aspect goes. So
Now, you don't, Ponds meets once a quarter. You guys don't have to meet monthly. It's whatever, the only thing, my only request is that it be consistent. If it's every 2 months, if it's every month, if it's every quarter, whatever you determine as a committee, we'll need to look at our calendar and make sure we pick, like the board, we know the board meets the first and third Thursday of every month. Pelican Preserve meets what date of the month?
Second Thursday.
The second Thursday of every month. And then that way, moving forward, if you have any scheduling conflicts, we have it on the books.
It helps the folks here to keep this room, you know.
And because of the newness, you're obviously going to be more intensive right now. As Chelsea said, that doesn't mean in the future.
Yeah.
And particularly once the attorney has finished with our delineation of who owns what and all.
Yes.
It'll still be very intensive through that process. But going forward in the future, you set your own time frame.
This is Nancy Smith. I have one question on the financials. On the monuments and cul-de-sacs, do we have a total number of what we're responsible for?
total number? No. I assume it's,
There is a list, Nancy.
Where would I find it?
I've got one.
Okay, thank you.
it's over 100.
Yeah, we did a
'Cause
survey.
I
of
noticed the
all of
budget's very small. That's why I'm
presidents to
asking.
tell us how many cul-de-sacs and monuments they had. I think I shared that with Mark. but I-
Yeah.
Once the attorney comes up with a comprehensive list of ownership, then it'll, from a staff perspective, we'll be able to look and say, okay, this is probably the purview of the landscape subcommittee, and these ponds are the purview of the pond subcommittee. The gatehouse that's ours. That would be the safety and security. So once we finally get that, we'll be able to give you guys really a comprehensive map and list of everything.
Okay.
We have a list of all monuments and cul-de-sacs. We haven't had the attorney weigh in that they are correct.
Yeah.
So far, I haven't seen anything where that's messed up. That is one thing that seems to be
Pretty consistent.
consistent. Everything else is up in the
Because normally those are in the right of way, and the right of way is conveyed over to the district.
Okay.
As long as we're talking about cul-de-sacs monuments, that was another item that I wanted to discuss. They are finding some that supposedly are PPCA responsibility as opposed to us. Being the very large one on the end of Avion. It says according to the
Lipa, the property.
LIPLA, that belongs to the PPCA, et cetera, et cetera. So they're taking ownership of that. So there seem to be a few discrepancies out there. But as far as cul-de-sacs and monuments, the way they have been handled in the past, before I was involved, is if somebody wanted to redo a cul-de-sac or a monument, they could request funding from the PPAC, who is technically owner and responsible for it. We do not want to go in and say, because they're buried deep within the HOAs generally. So the way they've handled that is to say, you decide what you want to do, and we will assist you with the funding on that. And that way each HOA has some personal buy-in and should be fairly happy with the outcome. And last year, we allocated funding for 3, of which 2 are ones that you're working on, and actually 4, but they didn't get them done last year for various reasons, And so they're going to hit our budget this year. Well, each one is allocated up to $2,500. So there's 4 already out there that were promised for last year. And then the first one that came in this year, I got approval for, which was a Matarita 2. And now they're coming out of the woodwork. we want to redo our cul-de-sac. We heard that you have money, so we
Me
want to
Too
redo our
movement,
cul-de-sac.
we love
Yeah.
the Me Too movement.
So all of a sudden, everybody's cul-de-sac looks terrible, and they're requesting funding. And so I've told all of them, the funding is allocated for this year. I would like to go to the PPAC and request additional funding be put into that, because a lot of these cul-de-sacs have been ignored for years. I don't know what the group's thought on that is. Like I said, 15,000 is enough to do 5 if they use the 2,500. We've allocated that. I already have application or requests to do 5 more, of which I've told I can't do if I don't have money in the budget right now. So I would like to request the PPAC board to allocate additional funds to do cul-de-sacs and monuments. I also have written up, because there was nothing about this in writing, how that process would work. And what I written up, which hasn't been approved because we didn't get it to it at the last meeting, was every community, every HOA can request once a year, $2,500. However, if you recently have received that money, it would be given preference to somebody else that hasn't received those funds in several years.
This is Nancy Smith. Sorry, I have questions
Sure.
too. The first one is, since some of the work did not get done last year, did any of that money transfer to the new budget?
No,
That's one, okay.
we have to close, if the money doesn't get spent within that fiscal year, which our fiscal year is October 1st to September 30th, it essentially goes into reserves. Unless we're told in advance of before we close out the fiscal year, hey, we need to move this money over. This is an outstanding project. Because that communication did not occur. The money it was put back into reserves. The money's there. It's just, we have to get the authorization from PPAC to move that money out of reserves to the specific line item.
So maybe something we should think about.
Well,
Nancy, in the past, this is Bob again. Money that was allocated to ponds that wasn't spent by ponds within a given year has historically been put back into a ponds reserve. I would expect something similar could be set up for landscaping.
We don't,
Shaking your head no.
no, we don't have PPAC only has a reserve. And if Laura's on the call.
Well, I'm talking about what Stephen Bloom does for us. Every year, there's a separate number that comes out for ponds reserves. And we've never in the past had a problem with that, and I wouldn't expect you in the future. And we probably haven't formalized it either, but again, that should be formalized. The bottom line of it is landscape money should stay in landscape.
Because I'm just,
Figure out what we gotta do to do that,
right,
but you'll have the money year over year. So if you didn't spend it this year, it's available to you spend next year.
that would open up 2
And we'll
more.
work out the details of that.
I think, I don't know, because I technically wasn't in this position until about a month ago. And Castle handled most of that. And I think when Castle was here, they moved money around to do other things. And then the last I knew, they pretty much depleted the budget that was allocated for last year.
I stand corrected. So in our reserves account, we do have a reserves for Pelican, a reserves capital, a reserves emergency, and a reserves ponds.
We never formalized that, Chelsea.
It's
I know we did it in fact, but we need to formalize.
on the books.
Yeah.
Stephen shows
Yeah, you always got it
$90,054.
separate.
So that's something, my preference for you all, and I know we're on a time constraint for this room, but my preference for you all is let's get the list of all, and we're planning on doing this for all of our assets and putting together a 10-year capital improvement plan. Let's get all of the cul-de-sacs, all of the monuments. Let's get a list and let's put a plan together. How many can we do a year? And then from that, we can start to put, okay, if you're on Aviano, you're going to get yours done this year. If you're in Casella, you're going to get yours done this year.
Before we do that, a lot of these HOAs take care of their own.
Well, that's the other part. And as far as.
And we don't have to allocate funds for them. And some of them are perfectly happy with how their cul-de-sacs look. So I don't want to basically tell somebody, here's $2,500 to go do something on your cul-de-sac if they're not
The
requesting.
beauty of that is we can budget and plan on our side. If the request doesn't come in,
Use it for something else.
then you can use it for something else.
Well, you know,
But it is still,
The danger in that, Chelsea, if I may, is once people think the money's available, they are going to spend it.
I
Exactly.
don't disagree, but from a staff perspective, these are GSCDD assets and we have to maintain them.
And I don't disagree. I just, like Bob said, as soon as you tell people you have money, then they're standing there, whether or not.
I'd
they
much
know what
rather
to do with it.
present it to the President's Association, the HOAs, how we've done it historically, and then see where that takes us in the future. Because if you offer people free money, which means their taxes are gonna go up, there's no free lunch. We pay for everything, and every dollar that's collected by the GSCDD on our behalf is spent in our community. We want to continue that.
Well, here's a follow-up question, which is probably good timing, which is when someone puts in a request, do we go out and take a look as to whether it really needs to be done at all?
No.
Should we? I
But
mean,
then
why
you
not,
need-
when a monument is bare, everything's dead, that's an easy one,
Right.
right? But if somebody, for example, I ran into somebody the other day that said, I don't like these plants. I would like something in here that's harmful to animals, believe it or not, so that they won't bring their dogs into the cul-de-sac.
So I think this goes back to you guys setting a policy and what is your criteria for authorizing that money? Is it stains from the irrigation? Is it bare? Because you're gonna get the difference of opinions where one resident may think it's beautiful and the other thinks it's
Right.
not. So
Some people want electric out there so they can decorate for Christmas. Other people want flagpoles.
I guess the stipulation that I did not put in my write-up was I would like the request to come from the president of the HOA as opposed to right now,
Joe Blow.
anybody says, hey, I heard there's money available and I think we ought to do ours.
Well,
So-
and I think if you memorialize that in a policy, I think that would be, this group come up with a policy, present that to P-PAC, let P-PAC adopt it, and then you guys can set your determination moving forward, if it's an allotment, and here's how you go through the process. Here's an application that the HOA requests to the chair, it's whatever you guys so choose.
It's all
Okay.
going to evolve. Remember, your first meeting.
Yeah,
Right,
We'll get
okay.
there.
you guys are jumping right in.
Just
So-
questions.
Yeah, no, it's good.
That was a great question.
So at this point, I would like to make a motion that we request for additional funds for the cul-de-sacs this year.
How much?
That I would like other people to give me an opinion, knowing that we have 5 allocated. We have 5 more in line. Again, our fiscal year ends in September and summer is normally pretty dead. So do we want to just allocate enough to take care of the 5 that are waiting at this point? Or do you want to try and get more funds than that?
Cindy Watterson, I would suggest adding a little padding for those that come on board. Not a lot, not saying 10 more, but if you have 5 requests now and your money is already allocated for this year, and you have somebody come up with something that really is dead, truly needs done, then you don't have the money in your budget.
Correct.
So add 3 or 4 more to it.
So
little
if
cushion.
we made it requesting budgeting for 8 more, that would be $20,000 in additional funding for
Yes.
cul-de-sacs and monuments.
So this is
I
This is Nancy. The only concern that I would have is if we're going to have a process in place where we're going to have a set amount every year. Okay, if we change that for this year and we add all of these, then we're setting a precedent for the following years. My suggestion, would be whatever monies we didn't spend last year, that's the dollar amount that we should add to this year so that we stay consistent and we can tell people the reason we're increasing it this year is because the money wasn't spent and there was reserves for that.
I think if we look there, all the money was spent for last year. Whether or not it was on cul-de-sacs, I think it was all spent.
Okay, well,
Can I ask you a question, Mark?
Sure.
The $312,000 allocated for trees and sod,
31, I'm sorry, that should be
so it's only
31,200.
31,000?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you see using all that money?
Yes,
Okay.
because there are several large trees that went down in the hurricane. We've been waiting on the stumps to come out. We've already gotten requests from people to replace them because now headlights are shining into their houses. and things
I'm
like
just saying, you have the option to transfer money within
that.
these funds. Aside
And we
from
could
asking for
do
new money,
that.
yeah.
But the fact that we're trying to recover from a hurricane
Yeah.
with some of our trees, the trees really eat up a lot of funds quickly.
And Mark, the other thing I think we should consider, Nancy Smith again, is the budget for, I mean, when we look at next year, did we plan enough for monuments, et cetera? Because we don't know what we own.
In the past, well, we know pretty much all the cul-de-sacs and monuments are ours,
Okay,
pretty much.
okay.
In the past, I think, my opinion, I wasn't actively involved, Castle just kind of said, okay, we didn't get hardly any requests for cul-de-sacs and monuments because people didn't know you could.
The HOAs did it.
And now the word is out that there is funding available and they are coming out big time.
So from staff recommendation, I would suggest you set your policy first.
Mhm.
Set your criteria, set the expectations for the HOAs, and then go from there. We are on the cusp of going into budget season. So we're going to be looking to the subcommittees and the committees for your guys' budget for next fiscal year. So that, and you blink and it's going to be right around the corner.
Mhm.
Have all of the ones, the money allocated for this year been approved?
By the PPAC, yes.
Okay, so we've expended all of the funds from this year.
They have not submitted the invoices yet.
Okay. See, and from a staff perspective, is it a reimbursement? These are just some things that I'm asking. Do they go pay for it and then are they?
No, they send the contractor, this is per Laura Leroy, the contractor sends the invoice to the PPAC up to $2,500.
So-
And then she pays them.
So the HOA essentially, I'm hearing different things, that's okay. Some neighborhoods have the residents go out, Bob will go out
Yep.
and buy a bucket of paint and paint it
Sure.
themselves on their own dime. Other communities they already have a landscaping company for their area, and then they just say, hey, go do this additional thing, bill the district $2,500.
Well, once they get approval.
Okay. Or option 3 is Nancy could take it upon herself in her community and say, okay, hey, we get a group of us together, we've got $2,500, let's go to Home Depot, let's get the stuff, let's paint,
No,
No.
according to Laura Leroy, it has to be an invoice from an approved contractor.
And that needs to be memorialized, and that's where we would look for the input from this committee on how you guys think these should
Well,
proceed.
I don't necessarily agree with that, because I think if Nancy says, we're gonna get a group of people together and buy $2,500 worth of plants and we'll do the work ourselves, I think that's great, as opposed to, no, you have to use a contractor, so therefore the amount of money available to you just got cut in half because you're gonna pay them to do the work. But according to Laura, we, at this point, cannot do that.
And some HOAs, Nancy Smith again, some HOAs candidly will not allow their communities to do any work within their community because of liability issues.
Correct.
So, again, just because we've always done it that way doesn't mean it's the right way to do it, right, wrong, or indifferent. We want your input on how you guys want to see this done moving forward. Are you setting the expectation that you want a landscape contractor to do the work on all of the monuments? If so, that's okay, let's put it in the policy. Are you okay with the residents going to Home Depot and submitting a reimbursement request? Weigh in on that.
Figure out what you want, what
Yes.
your preference.
I'm with you on
We'll
this
see if we
one.
can do it legally.
And it would be my opinion, again, my opinion only, we would allow residents to do that. I would validate that they have done what they have said they were going to do before they would be reimbursed for it.
Exactly. So let's put that as part. If HOA, if you choose to go path A and you do it amongst yourself, okay, post inspection, contact the chair of the landscape subcommittee to inspect. Again, let's just put it in writing and let's give us how you guys want to see it done.
I started something of which Georgia has a copy. What I'll do is, based on our discussion here, I'll redo what I have done. And I think I have to then send it to Georgia,
Yes.
who will then send it to you. So you can all comment on it, tweak it, do whatever you feel you're comfortable with. Then you send it back to Georgia.
So,
If we can't
Okay.
do it between
yeah,
ourselves.
you guys can't communicate
Right.
via email.
But, excuse me. Question. He could bring that proposal to this meeting.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, okay, okay.
So I think that the best path moving forward, not to take over, Mark can provide what he's come up with thus far, give it to Georgia, we'll disseminate it to this group. And then perhaps you guys work on what you would think, bring it to your next committee meeting and have the same discussion on how you foresee it moving forward, tweaking, adding, changing. And then once you are good with your policy, take it to PPAC and have them approve it.
Steve Keller, two quick questions. You mentioned the public email service. What if we just send it to the committee? Is that not doable
No.
either?
You're not allowed
Because
to.
I did reply to Georgia once because it said I wasn't allowed to reply publicly, but I replied directly to her.
Yes,
We can't create a committee. Okay, well, that was the
No.
first question.
No.
Okay, second question is, first thing that came to my mind when I heard about this committee was who designs these monument plantings? Who decides what trees are used to replace? I mean, how does that process work?
Committee.
At this point,
Yeah.
each HOA has the discretion to
Okay.
put in what they want.
Okay, does it need architectural committee approval?
No.
Okay.
now, these are GSCDD assets.
Yeah.
And that's why this committee was formed, because I believe it's the intent of the board to have, and PPAC to have some consistency of what's done over here.
Mhm.
And again, you guys are the architectural committee. You come up with the direction and the recommendation to PPAC. So it's ultimately, it's in your hands.
right.
Cindy Watterson, quick question. Haven't been able to ask this. It's January. All of this was decided. You've been in place for 1 month, correct?
Approximately.
So all of the allocated money has come from Castle? All the allocated money for every of your selection, who determined that?
Actually, I was here, but I was informally the person.
Okay,
And so the request came to me. And then I went to the PPAC board and said, these are requests, and then the board approved them.
so,
So
that-
I was
So
the
money
informal.
Came through the budget process.
right,
Our
right,
goal came through that.
I-
Now it's disseminated.
right. I'm just trying to determine that, if the budget began October 1st, it's January, you're already allocated 50% or 60%. How did that come to
They
be?
were all approved by the PPAC.
In the prior committee?
And the old system,
There was no prior
Prior committee.
committee. There
the old
was me.
system was Castle generating.
Okay, so we're just cleaning up Castle and then moving forward.
We're trying to formalize what
Mm-hmm.
was done previously.
Gotcha.
You're gonna have a lot more input than we've ever had before in developing the budget.
That's why I'm
Which is the whole
here.
purpose of it.
So I'm here.
So going back to an original question I had, you don't feel that we should request additional funding at this time? So,
From a staff perspective, I think you guys should implement and establish a policy first.
Alright.
But again, this committee, I mean, you guys can form your own opinion and take it to the PPAC and they can have, but from a staff perspective, I think it's cleaner that way, and then you set the expectations in the forefront.
okay,
And
Cindy.
Mark, you always have the ability through your committee to say, we're gonna take money out of palm trees and put it over here because we have that need.
That was.
I
my
don't
next
think I
question.
have that ability without getting approval from the board, do I?
Right, from
Well,
P- from P-
PPAC, but if you make the recommendations internally and take it to PPAC, you're within your total budget. They're gonna give you what you
I understand that, but again, my concern is, considering we're trying to recover from a hurricane, I see some large
If
expenditures
you need more
coming
money,
out.
You just ask for it. You get it.
Not necessarily all the time.
I'm an
Coming
optimist.
from the penny pincher of the
I'm an
group.
optimist.
The other thing, and we can say this for next time because we're starting to hit our time constraint, is we need to figure out what we want to start doing as far as upgrading our existing planting, which is a big reason why this group was created. Where to start, where to go to.
So, sorry.
Go ahead.
For intruding. I think the best steps moving forward, since this is your first committee, this is your first committee meeting, is put down your guys' projects and things that you want to work on. Okay, go to PPAC and essentially get their blessing. Because I'd hate for you guys to work on something for it not to go anywhere. And I've seen that. I've worked in government for long enough that it's disheartening. But getting PPACs, go ahead, Mark.
In our defense, we have made this request, and they actually allocated, not set aside, but approved 350,000 for us to go forward. Now that's in reserves. We would still have to go and request that those be pulled out of reserves and used for us.
So I would put down like a wish list of things that you guys would like to work on during this fiscal year between now and September. Mark can go to, or designee can go to the next PPAC meeting and say, hey, we had our first meeting, it went well, these are the things we'd like to work on. PPAC, are you good with this? And just if they say yes, then we come back and at your next meeting under items for discussion, we can put that list down. And then that way, because really we have to keep in mind the intent of these agendas and these types of meetings is to notify the public and your community of what you guys are working on and what you're doing. That way they can come in and give comments and input as well. So you'll see this is the same format for all of our subcommittees. Towards the end, when you set your next meeting agenda, that's when you say, okay, out of that list of things, we want to talk about the policy. We want to talk about the shrubs in front of XYZ monument. We want to talk at our next meeting. Then that way it gives that community the time to, hey, we put this agenda out a week in advance, typically. And then the public can see what you guys are going to be talking and working on.
Cindy Watterson, quick question. First committee.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to talk about that?
Not outside of a publicly noticed meeting.
So we can't talk about the improvements we want to make for the next meeting.
We have to email it to Georgia, who then will disseminate it.
Okay, so if we come up with our own plan and we want to all talk about it, we
And
send it to
I
her.
will be sending one out. I expect everybody else to have their own opinions
Gotcha.
but it's got to go through Georgia,
Yes.
so we don't violate the sunshine laws.
So
Okay.
Nancy Smith, if we are seeking information, for example, it was just mentioned that there are projects we are working on, and we don't know what those are. We come to you? Or we?
Georgia is technically your point of contact, Georgia Johnson. And she is the point of contact for all of our committees. Keith is the staff liaison. So it'll either be Georgia or Keith. We have, again, we're learning too. This is your first committee, so we're trying to figure out from a staff perspective the needs and how we can support you all. But I would say let's wait for Mark to compile his list of things that he's been working on for the last year or so.
Okay.
We'll get that disseminated to the group. And then that way you guys can review, add, tweak, and we'll get that on your next meeting's agenda. And then you guys can openly discuss that at the meeting.
So I'm familiar with the sunshine laws.
Mhm.
So my question is, I know that if I want to, for example, on the Prada board, I can send an email to one other board member.
Can't do that here.
Can't do it here. Okay.
There's the difference
Okay.
between,
The HOA rules.
Yeah,
All
HR,
right.
they're different than sunshine.
basically go through Georgia Johnson,
Okay.
Yes.
and it will be kept clean.
And her,
We-
her email's out on the site?
And I can send it to you as well. I think we're pretty much at a stopping point because this room is reserved for someone else, so.
Do you guys have any questions from a staff perspective? I know this is new. We're more than happy if you want to take some time out of your day. If you want to set up a quick 20, 30-minute meeting, we can kind of explain to you the district side of things and how we're operating. Things are changing quite a bit from our standpoint. And these are new to us just as they are to you. So we're trying to work out the kinks of everything. So just please have a little bit of patience with us. But we're eager to get you guys up and going and for the input that you can provide. Pelican's huge and there's a lot of GSCDD assets over here that we want to make sure that we're keeping to par. So,
Thank
Okay,
you.
Cindy Watterson, another question.
yeah.
When do you expect the mapping to be completed?
End of January was the last I was.
I was going to say, we need that to move forward, right?
Mr. Geppert and staff have been pushing Tony to get this completed as soon as possible. It is a very cumbersome task. I'm hoping the end of January, because not, you guys aren't the only ones waiting on that map. We have the other subcommittees as well.
January
there's-
20, oh, January this,
This.
January? Oh, okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you.
That's today.
Like today.
Today's the
Okay.
end of
Essentially,
January,
yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't, we have a lot going on, so I would say the next 2 weeks, truthfully.
Okay. Very
Because it's not,
important.
it's looking at plaques, it's looking at,
Oh, I understand the workload.
Lennar turned it over to us. It's a big task.
I'm gonna have to make a motion for adjournment due to the fact that people are gonna start coming in for the
Yeah.
next.
I'll
meeting.
second it.
Meeting.
Do you have a date for your next meeting?
Can everybody make a Tuesday morning like this, 9 o'clock?
Tuesday is really, 9 o'clock is really rough for me. Any other day of the week, that's the day I have my boss meeting.
Okay,
So that's a really tough day.
how about Thursdays at 9 o'clock? And again, I'm not talking every Thursday, I'm talking
Can you pick a date? That way we can make sure we get it.
right now.
I mean,
just-
we'll a
we'll
couple
just-
tentative dates, because I know we have to, Mark's got to confirm with KW on the availability of this room.
Okay, somebody else is gonna do that for me? I've been doing it.
You will have to
I don't
continue
care.
to do that.
Or if
March
you want to tell
9th.
me who the contact is, I can help you out, Mark. No
Well, it's
problem.
Janine.
I don't know Janine,
Well,
So.
I mean, it's not hard. It's
Okay.
just-
but I'm happy to help.
Why don't you pick 2 dates and then find out from KW which dates?
That far in advance, I don't think it's gonna be a problem. How about March 9th, which is a Thursday, 9 o'clock? Everybody check their calendars.
I'll make it work.
Well.
Yeah, I will make it work.
What
and
time?
the alternate date would be March 16th.
Are we meeting in February or no?
We could. The fact that we're fairly new, we'd have to get it going fairly quickly.
Right, give you some time to get
because-
everything out.
It
to-
would be,
Okay.
it would be my preference that you guys do it on the off weeks of the board meeting.
And what week is the board
The
meeting?
first and third weeks. So if you guys could do it on either the 9th or the 23rd,
I can do the 9th.
and perhaps the 23rd is an alternative.
All right, we can try that, but again, that's starting to get a little close as far as reserving the room sometimes.
No, the 9th of March. Because I
No, the
figured,
9th of February,
Oh.
she's talking.
would that give you enough time to get everything that you need to get to? Back to
That will
us?
be enough. We still have stuff.
Okay.
We obviously need to discuss things, and I can get out a cul-de-sac policy for everybody to comment on. And we can get some things rolling, I think.
All right, 9th of February. Hold on a second, please.
The 9th and the alternate is the 23rd.
9th looks good to me. Did you say in the morning?
At 9
9
a.m.
o'clock.
9 o'clock's fine with me.
Everybody else good at this point?
And once Mark confirms the availability of the room, Georgia will send out the date,
Yeah.
the confirmation.
And we obviously don't need this big of a room, so we could probably find something somewhere.
Okay.
If nothing else, just meet in the library. Except it'd be a little noisy.
Yeah, just try to keep
All
noise
right.
in
All right,
We
February
always
9th,
use our
9
board
I
o'clock.
will-
meetings available.
I will talk to Janine and see if we can get some space for March 9th at 9 o'clock. And then Georgia will send out the notification.
How long do these meetings usually normally go? Should I block out 2 hours?
That would probably be good,
Okay.
because we could have a lot more discussion at this point. than
Someone
what
can
we've
be the
had.
keeper of the bags.
All right.
All right, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Adjourned.
Thanks.
That is a copy.
So you're renting this
Yes.
property?
Georgia, you
and
turned it off.
I am working on that right now.
Okay.
It has been stopped.